Diane's voice cut through that VFW meeting room like a paper slice. "Who are you, really?" she asked loud enough that the coffee urn stopped gurgling and the men near the dartboard turned around. Sean Mercer stood beside her, red-faced collar damp, staring at me like I'd pulled a weapon instead of a manila folder. I didn't raise my voice. I slid one sheet across the folding table, my name in black ink at the bottom, stamped and dated, the kind of signature a bank treats like gospel. A chair scraped back. A plastic cup clinked. Somebody whispered, "No way." The room made that sound a crowd makes when it realizes the story it heard wasn't the real one. Diane's lips parted. Sean's mouth opened, then shut. His hands clenched like he wanted to crush paper into dust. And all I could hear was Diane's voice from the night before under warm restaurant lights saying the words that started all of this. "Family only. I live in Peoria, Illinois. I'm 56. My name is Gary Whitaker. Navy supply in my 20s. Logistics work ever since. The kind of job nobody notices until something stops moving. In this town, people know your truck, your handshake, and whether you pay your bills on time. They know I do." The night it started, I was standing outside Riverfront Grill on Water Street, looking through the glass at my wife Diane laughing with her ex-husband, like I was already gone. Inside was low jazz candlelight, the smell of steak and butter. Diane had dressed up, not for me, for that table. Her lipstick was fresh, her hair pinned the way she used to do for anniversaries. I realized standing there she hadn't done that for me in a long time. We went in together. The hostess led us back. Sean was already there, arm around Caleb, his son, my stepson, turning 18. Caleb gave me a small nod. Not rude, just careful. The kind of look kids give when they can feel adults lying and don't know where to put their eyes. We sat. Sean talked big old glory stories, new plans, expensive-sounding words that never came with receipts. Diane laughed too easily. I kept my voice normal and asked Caleb about school, about the truck he'd been saving for. He answered politely, eyes dropping to his plate. The waiter poured water. Sean ordered wine without looking at the price. Diane nodded like she approved. I watched her hand land on Sean's forearm when she laughed like it belonged there. Halfway through dinner, Diane leaned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Gary," she said softly, "this is just family tonight." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her over the music. "I'm your husband," I said. She glanced at Sean like he was the guest of honor. "Caleb's dad is here. We're doing it like we used to." Sean leaned back, satisfied. Caleb stared at the tablecloth, jaw tight. I felt heat rise in my neck, anger, shame, disbelief, all tangled together. I could have made a scene. I could have begged. Instead, I heard my father's old voice in my head. "You don't argue for a seat at a table that's already been cleared." So I nodded once. "I understand," I said. The words tasted like pennies. I set my napkin down and stood. My chair scraped too loud in that cozy room. As I stepped away, the waiter, a young guy trying to stay professional, gently slid my chair in closer to the table, like he was clearing space. That small motion hit harder than Diane's sentence. Watching my place get erased without anyone asking. Diane didn't look up. She'd already turned back to Sean. The conversation rolled on without me like I'd been background noise the whole time. I walked out into the cold and it felt like I'd been holding my breath for years. River air slapped my face. Headlights smeared across wet pavement. Somewhere behind me, laughter rose and fell muffled by glass. My phone buzzed, Diane calling. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, a text popped up. "Where did you go?" Like she hadn't just pushed me out the door. I drove home past Casey's bright sign, humming against the dark, then past the CEFQ branch where I'd signed papers more times than I could count. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollow. At a red light, a memory flashed years ago at a VFW fish fry, Diane, laughing at one of my dumb jokes, touching my elbow, like she was proud to be seen with me. Back then, being chosen felt like winning. That night, I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car engine, ticking heater, blowing lukewarm air. The house looked the same. I didn't. I went straight to my little home office, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out a black folder I hadn't touched in a long time. Contingencies. I sat down, flipped it open, and turned to the first page. Loan agreement, cosigner Gary Whitaker. Under it were attachments, renewal dates, guarantor language, neat copies of what my name was quietly holding up. I stared at my own name until it stopped feeling like a name and started feeling like leverage. Outside, the wind pushed against the siding. Inside, the house stayed quiet. And for the first time in years, I stopped filling the silence. Morning came the same way it always had since my Navy days, early, quiet, and without asking how I felt. At 5:30, I was already up standing in the kitchen while the coffee maker clicked and hissed its way towards something drinkable. Outside, Peoria was still dark. No traffic, no voices. Just that thin blue-gray light that comes before the sun decides whether it's showing up or not. That was always my favorite part of the day. Nobody needed anything yet. I poured the coffee black and leaned against the counter. The house smelled like old wood and yesterday. Diane's side of the sink was empty. No lipstick marks on a mug, no hairpins on the counter. Just space. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Diane. A couple of messages. "Are you coming home? We need to talk." I didn't open them right away. I set the phone face down and stood there listening to the refrigerator hum. That sound had been in this house longer than most of our arguments. It felt permanent, reliable. Some habits stick with you no matter how much life changes. I'd learned that in the Navy. Wake up early, make your bed, handle what's in front of you before it handles you. I still live that way even after uniforms turned into flannel shirts and boots instead of steel toes. I got dressed slowly. Jeans, flannel, my boots by the door. I checked my watch without thinking about it. Still accurate, still dependable. People hear what I do for a living, logistics operations, and their eyes glaze over. They picture warehouses, spreadsheets, forklifts. What it really is, though, is understanding how things lean on each other. Who signs what? What happens when a single piece is missing? I'd spent years being the piece nobody talked about. Diane used to tease me for it. You worry about boring stuff, she'd say, waving a hand like details were gnats. Bills paid early, insurance renewed on time, forms filled out carefully, signatures neat and legible. She called it Gary stuff. I let her. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for revenge. That word implies heat. This was colder than that, more deliberate. Before I did anything else, I sent Diane a short text. "Hope Caleb had a good night. I'm turning in early." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. I knew how it would read on her and wounded pride, nothing more. A man backing down. She replied with a thumbs up a few minutes later. That told me everything I needed to know. I closed the messages and started where I always did: facts, accounts, documents, names, dates. Most of our finances were joint, but the paperwork told a more honest story than conversations ever had. My name appeared more often than Diane realized. Then there was Sean. 2 years earlier, he'd come around talking about starting fresh. Needed a little help. Nothing dramatic, just a loan to get his feet under him. Diane had asked me to come to the credit union for support. Rita Henson had slid the papers across the desk, pen ready. "Just a formality," she'd said. "Your credit makes this smoother." Sean had clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies. Diane had looked relieved, like I'd saved the day. I signed because at the time it felt easier than pushing back, because family was supposed to mean something. I pulled the file up on my screen. There it was. My name in clean black letters. Guarantor, renewal clause every 12 months. No renewal, no continuation, no drama, just policy. I didn't make any calls, I didn't cancel anything. I just noted the date. Next was the reference letter. Sean's job at that regional supply firm, the one he liked to brag about when he'd had a couple beers in him. I'd written that letter. Diane had asked me to. I remembered hesitating, then telling myself it was the decent thing to do. The letter required an annual update. Standard procedure. I checked the calendar. Update due next week. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a second. Caleb's face drifted into my mind. 18 now, taller than me by a couple of inches. Still had that look when he was thinking, hard jaw, set just like his mother's. I remembered teaching him to drive along the river road, my hand hovering near the wheel, but never touching it unless he really needed it. He hadn't asked for any of this. That was the moment doubt showed up, like it always does when you finally stop being useful. I asked myself if I was hurting the wrong person. The answer wasn't clean, but it was honest. I wasn't pulling strings, I was letting go of them. Systems don't fail because someone gets angry. They fail because support disappears and reality takes over. That's not punishment. That's gravity. Around 9, Diane called again. I watched the phone buzz against the table. Each vibration felt louder than the last. When it stopped, the kitchen went quiet again. I thought about answering, about explaining, but explanations invite arguments and arguments turn facts into feelings. Facts stand on their own. Later that morning, I drove into town, not to stir anything up, just to move. I stopped at Casey's for coffee, same cashier, same nod. In a town like this, consistency counts more than charm. As I walked back to my truck, my phone rang. Rita. Gary, she said, calm as ever. We need to review some guarantor paperwork when you have a minute. Routine stuff. Routine, that word again. I told her I'd call her back. On the drive home, I passed the Illinois River gray and steady flowing, whether anyone paid attention or not. That's when it settled in. I wasn't choosing cruelty over kindness. I was choosing honesty over convenience. Diane wanted family only. Sean wanted benefits without responsibility. And I had been the quiet bridge between those ideas for a long time. I pulled into the driveway and sat there with the engine running, heat blowing, watching my breath fog the windshield. Inside, I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote a short list. Names, dates, documents, no threats, no plans, just awareness. I folded the paper and slid it back into the contingencies folder. That evening, Diane texted again. Can we talk tomorrow? I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. In the end, I sent nothing. Because stepping back doesn't look dramatic. It looks like routine. And routine, I was learning, can change everything. By late morning, the first cracks showed. It came as an email Diane didn't expect and couldn't explain away with a joke. I was in the garage sorting through a box of old extension cords when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I wiped my hands on a rag and glanced at the screen. Diane, do you know anything about this? Attached was a screenshot, an email from a local event planner. Polite, apologetic, firm. We're unable to move forward without updated authorization. Please contact us once all documentation is current. I stared at the words for a long second, then set the phone face down again. I hadn't contacted anyone. I hadn't said a word to the planner. I hadn't warned Diane or Sean or anyone else. All I'd done was stop being the safety net. That's the part people don't understand about systems. They assume someone has to sabotage them for things to fall apart. They don't see how much of life runs on quiet confirmations, renewals, references, signatures that get taken for granted. Diane called 5 minutes later. I let it ring. The vibration echoed through the garage, bouncing off concrete and old tools. When it stopped, the silence felt thicker than before. 10 minutes after that, another buzz. Sean this time. I didn't answer that one either. Instead, I went inside and poured myself another cup of coffee. The clock over the stove read 11:42 a.m., same clock that had been there since before Diane moved in. Same ticking sound, steady and unbothered. At noon sharp, my phone lit up again. Voicemail from Sean. I didn't listen to it right away. I knew the tone without hearing the words. By early afternoon, things picked up speed. Diane texted the caterer is saying the deposit didn't clear. Then another, Sean's bank is asking for paperwork. Then a third, can you please just tell me what's going on? I sat at the kitchen table, phone in my hand, and thought about Caleb. I saw him at 16 gripping the steering wheel too tight, knuckles white as we eased onto the river road. I remembered telling him, easy. The truck will tell you what it needs if you listen. He'd laugh, then nervous but proud when he made it back without stalling. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. That thought hit me hard enough that I almost picked up the phone. Almost. Then I reminded myself of something I'd learned a long time ago. You don't teach responsibility by absorbing consequences for other people. I set the phone down. An hour later, I finally listened to Sean's voicemail. Gary, man, I don't know what's happening, he said, breathless. They're saying the loan review is... this is routine stuff, right? You've always handled this. Call me back. Always handled this. That was the phrase that stuck. At 3:30, Rita Henson called again. Gary, she said, voice calm but careful now. We've got a renewal issue on the Mercer file. Your guarantor confirmation is overdue. I'm aware, I said. A pause, not awkward, respectful. Are you planning to renew, she asked. I looked out the window at the driveway at my truck sitting there clean and still. No, I said, I'm not. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. Rita had been in finance long enough to know when a man had made up his mind. All right, she said. Then we'll proceed accordingly. Proceed accordingly, another quiet phrase that carries weight. When the call ended, I sat there longer than necessary. My chest felt tight, not with excitement, but with something closer to grief. That evening, Diane showed up at the house. I heard her car before I saw it, the familiar rattle as she pulled into the driveway. The front door opened and closed harder than usual. Gary, she called. I stayed seated at the table. She came into the kitchen with her phone in her hand, eyes wide, voice sharp with panic. Everything is falling apart, she said. Sean's job is asking for updated references. The bank froze the account. The event, Gary, what did you do? I met her eyes. I didn't do anything, I said. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. That's not funny. I'm not joking. She took a step closer. Then why is this happening? I thought about the chair being slid in at the restaurant, about her saying family only like it was nothing. Because I said evenly, I stopped doing things. Her mouth opened, closed. She didn't have an answer for that. Caleb is scared, she said finally. He doesn't understand. Neither did she, not yet. I won't talk about finances in front of him, I said, and I won't lie to cover for anyone. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. That night after she left, I sat alone again. Same house, same chair, different weight in the room. The next morning, the final piece clicked into place. Another voicemail from Rita. Gary, just to confirm, without your renewal, the Mercer loan enters review immediately. Review, not punishment, not revenge. Just process. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. Outside, the Illinois River kept moving gray and patient. And somewhere across town, doors that had always opened for Sean Mercer began to close, not because I slammed them, but because I was no longer standing in the doorway, holding them open. The first time Sean really understood something was wrong, it wasn't in an office or over the phone. It was at a gas pump. I was at the Casey's on Knoxville Avenue, the one with the flickering light over pump 3, and the coffee that always tasted faintly burned. Late afternoon, cold enough that your breath showed if you stood still too long. I just started fueling up when I heard my name. Gary. I turned. Sean Mercer was striding across the lot, jacket, unzipped hair, damp with sweat like he'd been running. His car was parked crooked behind mine fuel light, glowing like a warning he'd ignored too long. He stopped a few feet away, chest heaving, eyes wild. What did you do? He demanded. I looked back at the pump, watched the numbers roll. The smell of gasoline hung in the air. I filled up, I said, same as you're about to. He stepped closer. Don't play dumb. The bank, my job. Everything's locked up. You did something. I shut the pump off and set the nozzle back. Slow, careful. I turned to face him. I didn't do anything, I said. I stopped doing things. He laughed sharp and hollow. That's the same thing. No, I said, it isn't. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now like a man looking for an exit that wasn't there. You can't just pull this. You've always handled this stuff. That word again. Handled. I leaned against my truck, felt the cold metal through my jacket. That's the problem, Sean. I handled it. You got used to leaning. His face reddened. Diane said you were upset about the dinner. This is about that, isn't it? I thought of Diane's smile under the restaurant lights, of the chair sliding in, of the way she hadn't even looked up. This didn't start at dinner, I said. That just made it clear. He stopped pacing and stared at me. So what, this is revenge? I shook my head. No, this is gravity. He scoffed. You think you're better than me? I think I said carefully that I warned you, and Diane, years ago. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but I kept going. I didn't break the bridge, Sean, I said. I just stopped being the one holding it up. For a moment, the only sound was a truck pulling in behind us and the wind rattling a loose sign on the building. His shoulders sagged, not all the way, just enough. You're ruining my life, he said. I met his eyes. I protected it longer than I should have. He stared at me, searching for anger, for satisfaction. There wasn't any, just resolve. You think you can just walk away, he said. I already have, I replied. He stood there another second, then turned and walked back to his car. The fuel pump clicked when he tried to start it empty. He swore under his breath and went inside. I got in my truck and pulled away. That night, Diane came over again. She didn't knock. She let herself in like she always had. But the confidence was gone. She looked smaller somehow, like the house had shifted around her. You embarrassed him, she said. I answered a question, I replied. She paced the living room, hands clenched. People are talking. They always do. She stopped and faced me. You warned us about what? I took a breath. This was the part that mattered. About confusing convenience with respect, I said. About leaning on someone so long you forget they're holding you up. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry yet. We're family. You said we weren't, I reminded her. At least not enough. Silence settled between us. Heavy, honest. I saw it then the moment she realized this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a phase, this was structural. And structures don't bend just because you regret standing on the wrong side of them. I didn't think you'd actually stop, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd ever ask me to leave, I answered. She sat down like her legs had finally given out. What happens now? I looked at the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. We'd taken it down years ago, telling ourselves we'd replace it. Now I said things stand on their own. She covered her face with her hands. I felt something in my chest twist, not satisfaction. Loss. But it was clean loss. The kind that doesn't rot. When she left, the house felt different. Not emptier, clearer. The next morning I got a text from Rita. Just confirming without renewal, the Mercer account enters full review today. I replied with a single word. Confirmed. At that moment, I understood something I should have learned earlier. In a town like this, your name carries weight long before your voice does. And when you stop lending it out, people finally feel how heavy it was. The room went quiet before anyone realized it had. That's how those places are church halls and community rooms. The noise doesn't stop all at once. It thins. Laughter fades into murmurs. Chairs scrape softer. Then suddenly you notice you can hear the hum of the lights. This one was the St. Mark's Community Hall off Willow Knolls. Folding chairs, beige walls, cheap white string lights draped along the far wall like someone tried to make it feel festive without trying too hard. A long table held a sheet cake with blue frosting and Caleb's name written too big in the middle. Happy 18th, Caleb, it said. I stood near the back, hands in my pockets, jacket still on. I hadn't planned on coming, but Rita had mentioned the hall earlier that day, and Walt Brannigan had called right after. You should show your face, Walt said. Doesn't hurt to remind folks you're still you. Walt's a retired machinist, VFW Post 2600, the kind of man people listen to without knowing why. If he said it mattered, I believed him. I didn't make an entrance. I never do. Sean was near the front, already flushed one arm around Caleb's shoulders like a claim. Diane hovered, close eyes darting whenever the door opened. She saw me before Sean did. Her face changed, not shock, not anger. Relief mixed with fear, like she'd been hoping I'd come and dreading it at the same time. People started whispering, not loudly, just enough. Is that Gary Whitaker? I heard something about the loan. Did you hear SEFQ froze? A chair scraped behind me. Someone coughed. Ice clinked in a plastic cup. Then Rita Henson crossed the room. She didn't look at Sean. She came straight to me and stuck out her hand. Gary, she said, good to see you. Rita, I replied. Behind her, Walt appeared, coffee in one hand, nodding like this was exactly where things were supposed to be. Evening, Gary. Evening, Walt. They stood with me for a moment, quite casual. But the message landed anyway. In a town like Peoria, people notice who stands where. Sean noticed too. He stepped away from the table and made his way over, jaw-tight smile plastered on like it was glued there. Hey, Gary, he said too loud. Didn't expect to see you. I was in the neighborhood, I said. Caleb slipped out from under Sean's arm and walked toward me. He looked taller than the last time I'd really seen him. Thinner, too. Older in the eyes. Gary, he said, confused. What's going on? The room leaned in without moving. I knelt slightly so we were eye level. Not tonight, I said quietly. Tonight's about you. Happy birthday. He nodded, but the confusion didn't leave his face. Diane stepped forward then. She didn't mean to speak loudly, but fear has a way of pushing words out. Why are you doing this to us, she asked. Every head turned. Sean shot her a look, but it was too late. The question hung there, raw and public. I straightened up. I didn't do anything, I said evenly. I stopped covering things up. A ripple moved through the room, not gasps, recognition. Sean laughed sharp. You hear this, he thinks. Walt cleared his throat. Son, Walt said not unkindly, you might want to sit down. That did it. Sean's face went red. He turned toward the table, grabbed a plastic cup, raised it halfway. Let's just do a toast, he said, for Caleb. No one lifted their cup. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was uncomfortable, heavy, the kind that tells you the story everyone's been hearing just changed chapters. Sean lowered the cup. Diane stared at the floor. Caleb looked at me once more, searching. I gave him a small nod. Not approval, reassurance. I stayed another minute, long enough for the point to settle. Then I slipped out the same way I came in. No door slam, no speech. Just absence. Behind me, the hum of the lights kept going. The cake sat untouched. And the toast died in the air. They finally cornered me 2 nights later. Not at my house, not in a parking lot. Somewhere more public, more careful. The conference room at CEFQ sits on the 2nd floor past a hallway that always smells faintly like carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. Folding chairs against one wall. A long table scarred with old pen marks. The kind of room where people don't raise their voices because they know everything echoes. Rita Henson was already there when I walked in. She nodded once and stepped aside. Diane and Sean were seated across from each other, not together. That alone told me how bad things had gotten. Sean looked like he hadn't shaved in days. His jacket hung open, shirt wrinkled. Diane sat straight, her hands folded tight in her lap, eyes red but dry. Rita closed the door. Thank you for coming, she said. This won't take long. Sean didn't wait. What the hell is this, he snapped. Why am I here? Rita stayed calm. Because the Mercer loan is under full review, and because Mr. Whitaker is the guarantor. Sean turned to me. You did this. I shook my head. No, I stopped preventing it. Diane finally spoke. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Gary, who are you really? The room went still. Not accusatory, not dramatic. Just a question that had been waiting years to be asked. I reached into my jacket and set a manila folder on the table. I didn't slide it dramatically. I just placed it there and opened it. Inside were copies, clean, organized, dates highlighted. This is what my name's been doing, I said. I pointed to the first page. Guarantor on Sean's loan. Renewed every year, until now. The next page. Reference letter for your job. Updated annually, due last week. Another. Emergency line of credit attached to the house. Never used, but always there. Sean stared at the papers like they might bite him. You didn't have to do all that he said. No, I replied, I chose to. Diane swallowed. Why? That was the real question. I stayed, I said, because I thought being steady mattered more than being respected. I looked at Sean. I protected you because I was told that's what family does. Then I looked at Diane. And I stayed longer than I should have because of Caleb. Her breath hitched. I was ready to leave 3 years ago, I said. I didn't. I waited until he was 18, until he could stand on his own without me quietly propping everything up. Sean shot to his feet. So this is some kind of punishment. No, I said, it's an ending. Rita cleared her throat. Without Mr. Whitaker's renewal, the loan enters default review. That process has already begun. Sean slammed his hand on the table. This is unbelievable. Diane stood slowly, tears finally spilling. You could have said something, she said. I did, I answered. Years ago, you laughed. Silence stretched between us. Sean paced the room, hands in his hair. You're enjoying this, he said to me. I met his eyes, I'm relieved. That seemed to break him more than anger would have. Rita gathered the papers. We'll proceed according to policy. She opened the door. Sean stormed out first, muttering under his breath, shoulders hunched like a man carrying a weight he'd ignored too long. Diane lingered. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd ask me to, I replied. I reached into my jacket one last time and set another envelope on the table. What's that, she asked. Separation papers, I said. Fair, clean, no surprises. Her hands shook as she touched the edge of the envelope. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded once, I know. Then I walked out. The hallway felt longer on the way back, the air colder when I pushed open the door. Outside the parking lot, lights buzzed softly, moths circling like they always had. I took a deep breath and felt something loosen in my chest. Not victory. Release. The river was gray that morning the way it gets in late fall, moving slow but steady past the bend south of town. I'd been there a while, sitting on a cold bench with a paper cup of coffee warming my hands. Same stretch of water where I'd once taught Caleb to skip stones. Same wind off the surface sharp enough to remind you you're still alive. I'd moved into a small condo a few weeks earlier. Nothing fancy. One bedroom, clean lines, quiet. The kind of place that doesn't pretend to be more than it is. I like that. The first few nights the silence felt strange. Not heavy, just unfamiliar. Then it settled into something I hadn't felt in years, peace without tension underneath it. People in town stopped me now and then. At Casey's, at the hardware store, a nod, a handshake. Sorry how things turned out, one man said. You handled it right, another told me. I didn't correct them. I didn't explain. Stories travel faster than truth in small places, but the end of this one didn't need defending. Diane signed the papers without fighting them. Clean, fair. She didn't call after that. I think she finally understood that some doors don't slam, they close quietly and stay that way. Sean moved out of town not long after. Last I heard, he was staying with a cousin downstate trying to reset. I wished him no harm. I also didn't miss him. The message from Caleb came on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun was dropping low over the water. I get it now. I'm sorry. Thank you for staying as long as you did. I read it twice, then once more. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't pain. It was something closer to pride. Not the loud kind, the earned kind. I typed back a short reply. You don't owe me anything. Take care of yourself. That was enough. I watched the river for a while longer, thinking about names and weight and the things men carry without ever talking about them. How you can spend decades building something solid only to have it tested by one careless sentence. Family only. Those words had taken more than they ever realized, but they'd also given something back: clarity. Here's what I learned. Real strength doesn't shout. Real power doesn't humiliate. And respect isn't something you demand, it's something you protect even when it costs you. I didn't win, I didn't lose. I walked away clean with my name intact. And sometimes that's the only ending that matters. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever felt invisible at your own table, remember this. You're not wrong for stepping back. Quiet strength still counts. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, real, grounded, and earned, take a moment to subscribe. Thank you for listening.